This is the interview of Maria Hjelm. The interviewer is Brenda Heppler. The date is May 29th. Now I'm going to just ask you this series of questions. Will be maybe not all the questions, because sometimes your answers include answers to other questions, so we just do it that way. All right, what are your first childhood memories of libraries?
When I went to elementary school, I guess when I was in about 3rd grade, they opened a new elementary school, and it was sort of a 70s style experiment with open classrooms. And the classrooms opened out into what was our public library. So we didn't simply have a door to the public library, our whole entire wall opened out into the public library. And then they had these things, if they needed it to be quiet, they could partition it off. Yeah. But we had free exchange. Wow. So if it was reading time, I could sit in my classroom, or I could just go out and sit in these big orange chairs. I was really, really good friends with the librarian. I remember her name was Pat Schrader, I think. Miss Schrader. And it was funny, the classrooms ended up closing because the population went down, but the library still exists there. So it was absolutely part of my everyday, because the school, that was also our school library. And we would write books that we would then give to the library, and they would code them like any other book and put them on the shelves. For all I know, they're still, the books that I wrote, and I remember my brother wrote a book, they're still there, but probably not. And we had our reading time in there, and we could interact with the community. I could go out of my classroom in the middle of the day, and a neighbor might walk by. So I had this incredibly close connection.
Wow, yeah.
It was really great. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Where did you grow up?
Until 6th grade, I grew up in Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania. It's funny, we moved briefly for 2 years to a town outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and I have no recollection it was not the most interesting community. I probably never went to the library there. I don't even remember where it might have been. And then we moved back to outside of Philadelphia. So.
Okay. And what were your favorite childhood books?
A lot of the sort of typical girly stuff. I was really into Nancy Drew. I read absolutely every Nancy Drew. I remember choosing a lot of strange books. I was sort of the weird one who would, I remember in 4th or 5th grade, I would choose things that weren't always appropriate for me. Like I remember doing a big report on Joseph McCarthy in 4th grade. I don't know if I understood any of it, but it was a book I found and I thought was interesting. And I remember in maybe 5th grade doing a report on Adolf Hitler. And I don't think that was particularly appropriate either, but I think I probably liked nonfiction then more than I even do now, because now I sometimes force myself to read nonfiction because I think it's good for me, but what I really like to read is fiction.
Yeah. Okay, and where did your awareness of community come to you when you were growing up? When did you become aware of being part of a community? Maybe that 3rd grade experience.
Yeah, I think as a young child, I was probably even more aware of it, because later when I was in high school, I don't think I was as interested in my community. So up until about 6th grade, I was obviously very in tune with my library. It was a fairly small town. We had one street where you could walk to where the pharmacy was. I knew a lot of the people around there. It's a decent-sized suburb outside of Philadelphia, but it was still small enough. I grew up in a church. My father was sort of one of the ministers. He wasn't the main minister there. He was a bit of an adjunct minister because he had a day job. But that was really part of our community as well. And I grew up in a church, just having free reign of the place. I was completely comfortable. I knew absolutely everyone. And that was sort of an extension of the schools. I remember I went to church with some of the teachers. Some of the teachers in my school lived on my block. And in many ways, a lot like Lafayette can be. everything was intertwined. We moved away after 6th grade, and we ultimately came back, but not to the same exact little town. And when we came back, my parents decided to send me to a private school. And suddenly I was, that was not really my community anymore. And it probably wouldn't have been anyway, because I was in high school.
Yeah. Well, and high school becomes your community.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What is your educational background?
I have a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, so a BA in English literature.
And what attracted you to Lafayette?
We ended up out here somewhat by default. I mean, sort of kicking and screaming, because I did not want to leave Oakland. I actually love Oakland and the idea of Oakland because it's a city, yet it's also feels a lot like a small community. But the housing issues in Oakland and the schools finally just drove us out here, and we said, forget it. We're not going to bid on one more house in a questionable school district. We're just going to move and find a house that we can afford and in a good school district. So that's why we came here. And the issues of diversity and things like that really were problematic for me. And I have to say, I was really, really concerned that this was going to be like Stepford wife land. And it turned out to be just completely the opposite of my worst expectations. So it was good.
Yeah. And how long have you been here?
Almost 6 years.
Oh, okay. If we define the goals of a community as a place of mutual support, shared values, acceptance of difference, how do you see Lafayette meeting those goals?
I think Lafayette does a pretty good job of meeting those goals. I mean, I certainly think that most people here share the same values. I mean, and I'll say this, I hang out with people of the same values. I mean, those are the people I seek out. And when and if I think I don't share the values with someone, those end up not being the people I am attracted to. I mean, I will say that acceptance of differences is something I'm not completely sure this community has grasped. I mean, I think it's still pretty homogeneous, it's quite affluent. There's not a huge sense of reality around here. I think that's something that we're working towards. Actually, I think the library will hopefully be a bit of an equalizer in that sense if we succeed in bringing in people from all over the county. And I think that would be great for everyone. But it's a really well-educated community, Lafayette, at the same time, and there's some really incredibly worldly people around here, more worldly than I am, who are doing really interesting and amazing things and know lots. So, but there are also those people who, don't ever need to leave La Miranda, and they'll be perfectly happy. So.
What are your earliest memories of the Lafayette Library, like when you first came and walked in the door?
I'm not sure I remember actually going in there with I think when we moved here, my son was 1, so I went to Miss Donna's kids' time, or, whatever it's called. And I remember probably walking into the library and being like, ew, this isn't that nice, but sat down and I just thought immediately that Miss Donna was like the most gifted woman around, and I wish she were my kid's grandmother, or something like that. I just absolutely, I was as attracted to Donna as all the children were, and I loved it. I don't like big crowds though, so once her program really started getting crowded and got all this momentum, I sort of stopped going, because I'm like, I can't fight my way to the front of the crowd to like children's hour. And I have to say, my youngest son, who's now 7, he loved Donna so much, and he just, at the end of story hour, he would have to go and hug her she has this little monkey, and so it was so heartwarming for me to go and do that. And then, and I quickly got involved in the new library campaign almost as soon as I got here, because I met Linda Peterson through a mutual friend, and she sunk her claws into me right away and said, I want you to join the Friends board. We need younger women, and Linda and I ended up having a whole bunch of sort of work things in common. And so we hit it off, and I was like, well, sure, I'll join. It's a good way to meet people, and my book publishing background made sense for a lot of it. So that's how I got involved.
And this is not a question on the paper, but how did you get started with Sweet Tuesdays?
Because of Linda. I mean, Linda, I think what Linda realized about me is that I have a lot of contacts in publishing, and I've a fair amount of experience in putting together programs. So she said, do you want to she pretty much immediately was like, hey, here, do you want this? Take it over. And I said, kind of stupidly, I said, sure.
Can I ask you, was it already going?
She had started it.
She had started it.
I think it had been going, and this probably needs to be double checked. I think it had been going for a year or two.
Okay.
But I mean, she's got a busy work life, and I think she was really ready to let someone else in. And the other person who founded it with her, Gloria Lenhart, she was on the Friends board, and she's not around much anymore. She was stopping her involvement. So Linda definitely needed some assistance there. I joined the Friends board, and I went to Sweet Thursdays immediately. I mean, and I have to admit that made the most sense for me. So
it honored your abilities.
Yeah, it was what I knew.
Yeah, right. And so as far as how often do you actually use the library outside of presenting Sweet Tuesdays? Do you use the library at all? We do, although not as much as we should. The kids use it quite a bit. Okay.
I'm terrible about returning books, though. So I'm always having to go to the counter and beg Robbie and Susan to forgive my fines because I'm so bad, and I'm always like, I'm a volunteer. Forgive my fines, please. And so actually lately we've been there quite a bit, and I know over the summer we'll be there a lot. I recently, I think with the economy and everything, I've traditionally bought a lot of books for myself because I'm in publishing, or I'm given a lot. I recently said I was not going to buy any more books, and I have enough books in my bookshelf to keep me going for ages. I don't check out as many as I should. My kids check out a lot, though.
Yeah, that's good. And how do you feel a library serves a community?
I think it's so incredibly important. Many different levels. I mean, it's a place to meet up. I mean, I think for some, I certainly go in there, and they're the kids who are loud, but it offers a safe social haven for kids. It offers umpteen resources for seniors and people my age. I bet now, and with people looking for work, it's taken on tremendous importance for people. And for children and mothers, it's incredibly important. So there's this whole social notion that goes with the library, but then there's also the intellectual notion that goes with it. I mean, what if a community values education and books and ideas, then it's going to value a library, and that's going to be a resource. And I mean, I always, when I talk to other people about our library, I always point to the fact that, the library, the present day library, it's shabby, it's small, but I mean, that is one well-loved place. If 500 people go through there a day, that just amazes me. I know. Yeah, it's just incredible. So I think as a place for the community to gather, it's beyond important. And what I really like to think about the new library, because it's going to offer creature comforts, it's going to be technologically better, it's going to be a place where we're going to have all this programming. It's going to be the genuine replacement for not just the new library, but for this other gathering of people that you see constantly at Noah's and Jamba Juice, which I'm there enough too, but I can't stand it. I'm like, is that really our town center? A strip mall? Our town center should reflect the values of our town and should be a place of ideas and a place, what better than a place of books and a place of programs. So, I think it's going to be a perfect reflection of our community.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Have there been any especially interesting experiences in your involvement with Sweet Tuesdays?
Well, just about everyone is interesting.
Uh-huh.
I'm sort of the typical book publisher, where, by which I mean I'm not a master of anything. I'm a jack of all trades. So I can interview one author and learn a little bit about a particular topic, and I get very, very jazzed. So, I'll try to point to a couple that I just thought were fantastic. And of course, I've had a few interviews that were difficult for me, or that I didn't think came off so well. But, we recently had an author whom I was really reluctant to bring in. And honestly, we did it as a favor to someone. She did a book about her father's role in freeing Buchenwald. But it seemed like a slim volume to me. But in truth, she came in, she attracted so many students. This little book offered young people a way to understand the Holocaust in a way that wasn't so scary, because it was about the freeing of the prison. And she offered up her father's point of view, which was, that this man had witnessed firsthand the atrocities that had gone on there, and she was able to just completely convey her father's view on things. And it was not only fascinating, it was just incredibly moving, and she conveyed the most important thing, which was, never again. And so that was amazing, and I was reluctant, because I am, I'm always like, well, is it a self-published book? I don't know about a self-published book, and I'm a bit of a snob that way. And then we've had other authors like Andrew Shangrier, who wrote The Confessions of Max Tivoli, and he was like just such a delight to talk to, so interesting, so personable. It's really fun for me to sit up there and get these people to talk, and to have them, be so likable. And most of them absolutely are. I mean, Ayelet Waldman was a different story. She was like herding cats. That was really, really hard. And she's known for being abrasive and tough, and she was indeed. And she publicly, she's also known for sort of running at the mouth, and she publicly, at our event, accused Philip Roth of plagiarizing her husband's work. And I was just in such shock, but I thought, wow, this is good. Here I've got someone accusing one Pulitzer Prize winner of plagiarizing another Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm like, wow, if I sent this into the New York Times, they might actually be interested. Almost every Sweet Thursday experience surprises me. And now more and more, because we've got the marketing down, and I get to every event and I think, oh, no one's going to show. No one's going to show this time. And lately, our crowds are just fantastic. I'm always really pleased and always just delighted at the sort of appetite of our community. It's really impressive.
Okay, now you weren't involved. That was wonderful. And I have to also add the Guernsey Literary.
Oh, yeah, I know.
That was great fun.
Talk about likable.
Oh,
I mean,
you
just wanted to please be my best friend.
She was adorable.
I know.
She was just great. You've been here 6 years, so you were not part of any of the early vision part. Yeah, I'm going to just, I think you've expressed it, but in general, but why is the new library important to you?
Well, I think the main thing for me is what I pointed to. I mean, about giving the community a new and really relevant cultural center.
Do you think, or maybe better, exciting? Why would this particular library, be more exciting to you maybe than?
Oh, well, I mean, the consortium, with which I've done a lot of work, is definitely exciting. I mean, I think this notion of bringing partners in to do programming. I mean, first of all, it's almost absolutely necessary these days that groups partner, because there's simply not enough money to sustain museums and libraries and make each and every one an exciting place. But, no one's ever done it before. And what we're poised to offer the community, and I mean, not just La Miranda. To me, this notion of serving the entire county is absolutely vital. And I know enough about programming, too, that if we rely on just La Marinda, we can't fill the seats. But that we can offer our community and a lot of the underprivileged areas in Contra Costa County programming that might be easy for them to get to and might be really cost efficient. You know, I mean, what's better? In a nice, new, beautiful building.
How did you get involved with the development of the consortium, or what roles have you played in the development of the consortium?
I think I ended up getting involved with the consortium because, you know, I was already doing Sweet Thursday, but then I was on the marketing campaign committee, and we worked together on that kickoff, and I oversaw many of the programs for the kickoff. And I volunteered then just to keep going. But I have to admit, I thought this was the most exciting portion of the new library, and I wanted to work with these institutions and continue to foster them until the library opened. And you know, and I'm still on that committee.
How large is the consortium committee?
Well, maybe 6 or 8 of us.
Okay.
I mean, I'm doing things, my role is really diminished now because I just can't do it all, and because I'm really committed to Sweet Thursday, and I think it's probably better that I keep that up as opposed to my work with the consortium.
And what have you particularly enjoyed the most in your involvement? Any highlights?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been incredibly interesting for me to work with some of these institutions on the programs that we have put on. Now, we're not putting programs on all the time with these guys, but we've put on some. Some of them have been quite successful. I mean, I've done a few things with Lawrence Hall of Science that were great, and it's been fascinating for me as a user of these institutions to then learn about them and what it is they were attracted to with the library and what it is they're sort of looking at moving forward. And, you know, they all have different aims and goals in this relationship.
And just without mentioning names, could you mention a few of these aims and goals that have popped up?
I think across the board, they all hope that their involvement with us will help them find a new demographic. A lot of them are sort of based in the East Bay and don't necessarily come that far. Their demographic doesn't go that far down 24 or out to 680. So I think they're hoping for that this increases their membership at home, you know, and just increases awareness of their institutions. I think they're also, some of them are just brimming over with ideas and things that they can do. So having another venue in which to put on their programs, whether it's a true program, you know, it's a live program or it's an installation, or, you know, they're just happy to have somewhere else to do it because they have so much going on.
That's great. What values did your contribution touch upon while you participated? In other words, your values, which of your values were expressed the best as far as this whole development, be it the library, be it knowledge, be it community, which I think, I mean, your values have been, I understood your values, but in some specific connection.
Well, I think one of the most important values I have is I put a lot of, like many of us, a lot of stock in education and culture. And I think working with these institutions in the consortium and simply working on the library helps. It gives me contact with those institutions. Like I said, you know, I'm a jack of all trades, a master of none. And I think that's the biggest thing, is bringing knowledge to a community.
And I mean, that answers it quite well. What transformation have you seen in Lafayette in the 6 years you've been here relative to the development of this new library? Any changes in your time here?
Well, the library was sort of already underway. A lot of people knew about it when we'd already gotten here, so I don't know that I've seen a huge transformation per se. I mean, the one thing I would say is I think people just sort of want to see the library open now. They're kind of like, I gather that they're done hearing about it. They want to experience it. But there has been this slow growing awareness of all that the library is going to offer. I think the new library's offerings are, it's a mouthful to describe the library, the consortium, all the institutions. And so some people caught on pretty quickly, but a lot of people didn't. If they're not reading or listening, then, they're like, oh, the consortium? Who's Glenn Seaborg? And, and you have to really take a few minutes to give the whole spiel. And so slowly, people are starting to really understand and get the scope of the new library. And it's going to be, I think, just fantastic when it finally opens. And then those people who still weren't paying attention get to experience it and see firsthand all that the library is going to do.
Yeah. And so would you say that's probably going to be your most exciting moment?
I think it's going to be pretty great. Yeah. I mean, we're right now, because now I have a partner on Sweet Thursdays. It's not Linda anymore, Casey Sasner. And she and I are working on the first author who's going to, on November, we have one date, November 19th, and we want to get a pretty good author. Isabella Allende just turned us down. But so we need to find someone. But that first Sweet Thursday event will definitely be, a big day for us.
Yeah, really big. And why do you, I think you've touched on it, but maybe just reframing it a little bit. Why do you think so many enthusiastically?
I think because of our shared values. I mean, I think most of the people in this community, they've moved here because of the schools. More and more, they've moved from Oakland and San Francisco. They've left a cultural scene, but really want a cultural scene in their own town. And this is what the library is going to offer.
Yeah. I think that could be qualified, that answer you gave me could qualify also with your greatest hope.
Yes.
For the library, I think. Yeah. And how do you think the library will affect or better serve or enhance our sense of community?
I have a vision of the library, where there's not 500 people going through there a day. There's probably going to be 1,000 to 2,000 people going through there a day. And imagine all the students who will be studying there, all of the young parents, all of the people like me in their midlife, all the seniors. I mean, it's really going to be a gathering place.
For all generations.
For all generations. I mean, when I think of it in my mind, I see all kinds of people in there at all hours doing all sorts of things. Now, it may really take a while before all of the programming comes together, but I think from the get-go, it's going to be a really well-utilized place and easy to get to. I would love to see fewer kids hanging outside of Jamba Juice. Not that Jamba Juice is such a terrible thing, but I hate to think of retail as being our center. I much prefer to think of a place of culture as being our town center. I remember something in college that I learned. A professor, Digby Baltzell, I guess he's the guy who coined the phrase WASP, which was his claim to fame, but he talked about, this might have been another professor, but I think it was Digby Baltzell, who talked about how, hundreds of years ago, churches were the highest point in any town. And because spiritual centers were the most important, and how in our day, in any city, the highest point, and this was especially true in Philadelphia, the highest point is not a church, it's not a city building, but it's a place of commerce. It's the financial buildings that are the tallest and symbolically most important. But in our town, we can't really measure based on height, but in terms, I'd like to see a building of culture be the most important place in our town.